Airplanes are getting safer. At least, this is what all the statistics around the world seem to indicate. Every day, there are fewer plane crashes and many more checks and inspections on each aircraft leaving the hangar. However, the danger is still there, although not the one you're imagining. Heights can be intimidating and terrifying, especially when paranormal events and chilling facts that neither passengers nor signs can explain begin to occur in the middle of a flight. Would you like to know what we are talking about? Then get on this flight to discover one of the greatest mysteries of aviation. The tragic story begins on December 29, 1972. Flight 401, Eastern Airlines, Lockheed L-1011-1 TriStar jet. The pilot in command was Bob Loft, a veteran pilot with more than 30 years of experience, accompanied by Officer Albert John Stockstill, Flight Engineer Donald Repo, and 10 other cabin attendants. Flight 401 was scheduled to arrive at Miami International Airport at 9:20 p.m. There were 163 passengers on board, all minding their own business, completely unaware of what would happen that night. Just as the plane arrived at its destination, one of the officers noticed that the landing gear light had not come on. Apparently, something was blocking it and they instantly began looking for a solution. Meanwhile, the passengers looked worried. The aircraft was circling in the air for no apparent reason. The flight crew tried to calm the growing doubts of the passengers, but everything turned into absolute chaos when they felt the abrupt descent towards the ground. The plane plummeted, faster and faster. However, the landing gear wouldn't open. The plane's speed exceeded 227 miles per hour. The pilot and his crew were on the verge of despair. And then Flight 401 crashed into the brush and grass at the edge of the airstrip. The impact caused the immediate death of Officer Stockstill, Donald Repo, and dozens of passengers. That agonizing night, as firefighters and attendants tried to rescue passengers, Robert Loft, 2 flight attendants and 97 passengers in total, also died. The crash became one of the second deadliest air disasters in U.S. history. Mourning permeated the nation and families for weeks. The reason for the crash was labeled as technical failures of the plane, with confusing specifications that eventually ceased to be discussed in the media. However, several months after the accident, something very strange began to happen on flights covering the same route between John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York and Miami International Airport. Passengers, crew members, pilots, and attendants taking flights on this route encounter events that border on the supernatural, and some of their stories began to spread as true facts. At that time, there was no internet, and passengers had barely heard of a plane crash, but their descriptions of the specters that haunted the aircraft were accurate and chilling. For example, one of the earliest accounts came from a female passenger who, after returning from the bathroom, noticed that a man looked unusually gaunt and pale. The man appeared dazed. The woman's efforts to help him went unanswered. The passenger immediately approached the flight attendant. In less than 2 minutes, she told him what she had seen, but when they returned to the seat, the passenger had disappeared. Upon questioning the rest of the crew, most also claimed to have seen a man occupying the seat, a man who, of course, had disappeared. Most people describe the subject with features and characteristics that fit the profile of Robert Loft, although no one knew the individual or had read about the accident. Of course, this wasn't the last time something similar was recorded. The same year, several passengers reported similar events to the airline, and even the cabin attendants themselves witnessed ghostly figures approaching the pilot's station and then mysteriously disappearing. Most were able to give accurate descriptions not only of Robert Loft, but of Donald Repo and other passengers who perished during the crash. Curiously, these accounts began to multiply. Every flight that covered this route ended up with a different ghost story. On several occasions, different attendants encountered the specter of Loft, wandering around the plane before the crew came to their seats. On other more surprising occasions, the flights seemed to have strange noises and cries of despair that no one could explain. Some people also described the atmosphere as overloaded, gloomy, and tense. A number of crew members also reported feeling observed during the trip, and some pilots even reported strange noises in the cockpit and unusual movements before and after each flight. The airline authorities took it upon themselves to do all kinds of monitoring on the matter. They checked the engines, the technical components, and the structure of the aircraft, but nothing had any effect. The sightings continued without anyone being able to explain what happened. The strangest thing is that the ghosts of Loft and Repo came to warn of dangers. For example, a flight engineer saw him in the dark, just before takeoff, when he was doing a routine inspection of the aircraft's components. To his surprise, the place where Repo's ghost appeared had a tiny but significant fault that could have turned it to a major accident. On another occasion, Eastern Airlines' own vice president had a conversation with a distinguished man whom he thought was the pilot of the plane. It was a first-class flight, so this wasn't unusual. A few minutes later, however, the real pilot of the aircraft came to meet him. When he asked for the person with whom he had spoken, he discovered that his description was exactly that of Robert Loft. Like these stories, there are hundreds. The records have accumulated all kinds of anecdotes, sightings, and paranormal stories that make it clear that something really inexplicable was happening on the flights of this airline. Nobody managed to completely decipher the mystery of Robert Loft and his alleged life as a ghost. Nor was it possible to explain the supernatural events that were recorded during several decades on the flights. However, for most people, this fact only proved that the deceased were still attached to the life they had before their death. For this reason, even in our days, flights between New York and Miami continue to record some unusual anomalies from time to time, like screams whose origin nobody knows, and events that only those who know this story know how to identify. But don't think that this is the first time something paranormal had happened during a flight. Nothing is further from the truth. The heights seem to be an unsettling place where amazing events are recorded. Some seem like science fiction, others like horror movies. They are more real than you think, and if you check out the following videos, you'll be able to prove it.